Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. It's the third evening of the Samadhi retreat that Bhante Pamuta has been kind enough to organize. I'm quite enjoying our chanting and reflecting on the Samaññaphala Sutta, one of the principal suttas where the Buddha sets out the gradual training, as it's known, the special formulation of the Noble Eightfold Path for bhikkhus in particular, for the training in the holy life, the celibate life of those who go forth. I'm using bhikkhus here in the inclusive sense of that Bhante Sujato points us towards. Apparently there's an argument that he makes that we can understand bhikkhus as gender inclusive. So when I refer to bhikkhus, please understand I'm also pointing to bhikkhunis. Tonight we chanted from a part of the gradual training that doesn't get a lot of attention in Dhamma talks, I'm realizing, and bears more than it does get. I'm not sure if last night was the first night. I think that I missed the first night of chanting, but it was the first part of the gradual training that was chanted last night, and that was the first stage of the training when, if I have the sequence right, the bhikkhus, or the newly gone forth bhikkhus to train in sila and conduct, ethical conduct, and how is it phrased, Bhante? The first step of the gradual training. Learning to practice, well, to purify his conduct, I think gets the idea across. Sila provides the foundation of calm and integrity that gives the bhikkhu the confidence and inner strength to walk the path. It's the foundation. It's the ground that the bhikkhu has to keep firm and intact to be able to walk the path. It requires continual cultivation. But as the bhikkhu progresses on the path, it becomes internalized. It becomes a matter of simply listening to one's own heart to know what's necessary to maintain sila. Once the bhikkhu starts to have that inner compass to know which way to go, the path develops and moves on to the stages that we talked about this evening. There's the training in restraint of the senses. This was a matter of great mystery to me when I first took up the holy life. Please correct me if I get the order wrong, Bhante. But I believe that sense restraint came next in this rehearsal of the training. It's an interesting note that there's 6 or 7 suttas where the gradual training is given, and in each of them there's a slight variation, not in the order, but in terms of where the emphasis is and what's detailed. But here in the Samaññaphala Sutta, we have a exposition of sense restraint, which is really bears attention. Sometimes sense restraint is described as a set of external restraints, external self-controls. We learn the wisdom as bhikkhus of, I guess the modern way to put it would be setting ourselves up for success. When we, for instance, are walking down the main street and we pass a bakery with the door wide open and all the smells of the delicious cakes and candies are pouring out from inside, we practice the external restraint, if we're wise and if we're feeling like gorging on cakes and sweets, of walking on past the door, not lingering to delight in those smells and maybe be drawn into the store. When our eyes fall upon a person who attracts us, who we think is especially enticing, maybe stirs us, awakens our interest in them in a way that we've walked away from. If that we find the person attractive, then we practice the restraint of averting our eyes. This is a very against the stream kind of idea in our contemporary culture. The idea of like turning your eyes away from something to protect yourself from the powerful feelings that it can awaken in you. But it can be the path of wisdom if you've committed yourself to setting aside that set of passions. I think of the common advice for the dieter who wants to be able to have the cookies in the house for his or her kids or friends, but doesn't want to eat the cookies themselves. It's common sense is, you put it up on the shelf behind a couple of other things to make it so you can't just impulsively find yourself in the middle of eating a box of cookies before you realize what happens. You set yourself up for success in that way by setting in place external restraints. But in the Samaññaphala Sutta, we also are directed to the idea of sense restraint as an inner practice. In some senses, it's a very advanced mindfulness practice. It's awareness of what's coming in at the sense doors. It's opening ourselves to mindfulness of what's impinging on our attention at whichever the sense doors it comes in at, whether it's the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, or any of the tactile senses. It's simply being alert to whatever stimulus is stimulating us. That awareness is enough for the practice of sense restraint. When we remain aware, we have the power to choose to what degree we want to, as is put in the Thai idiom, to go out to what it is that's stimulating us. We have the power to choose whether or not we want to stay in our awareness, restrained from whatever that stimulus is, or go out to it and engage it. So those two ideas of sense restraint work together, with the first culminating in the second, developing into the second. So after we spoke about sense restraint, the Samaññaphala Sutta turns to, I believe it was moderation in eating. Was that the next?
Sati Sampajanya.
Oh, Sati Sampajanya. mindfulness and clear comprehension, as it's usually translated. Bhikkhu Sujato, whose translation we just took in, has the interesting translation, mindfulness and situational awareness, which is, I think, quite a good translation in its way. This is quite an interesting article to find in the description of the gradual training.
There's cushions there if you want.
Please come in. Make yourself comfortable.
Thank you.
We know that mindfulness is a central part of the practice. All of the traditions that are part of the American stream now have more or less of an emphasis on it, and teachings around it. But in the gradual training, it's construed in a way that's not so common in some of the more popular styles of practice in America, at least. In the Insight movement, where I started out as a meditator, mindfulness was really front and center as kind of the main way forward in the path. But in the gradual training, it's very much framed as a stage, a kind of penultimate stage prior to the culmination in samadhi, which we'll be coming to. But in the same way that sila remains an essential, integral part of the path all the way through, even though it's the first stage in the gradual training, mindfulness is no less important for being framed as a stage. And it's framed as a cultivation in continual awareness in all postures. For students and fans of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutta, there's a very well-known passage that gives us 4 postures, and the tradition took up those 4 postures as foci of formal practice: standing, sitting, lying down, and walking. And those 4 forms of meditation are very much cultivated as specific formal practices. And different traditions have handed down specific techniques for practicing each of those postures. Sitting meditation is so strongly emphasized that for a lot of people in the broader culture, it's synonymous with meditation. Meditation means sitting meditation. And for those who go a little bit deeper into the popular styles of meditation as they're taught in many of the contemporary schools, we get the 4 formal postures. But even in the Satipatthana Sutta, the mindfulness, the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness Sutta, the 4 postures are not all that's mentioned, even in that famous reference. If you actually go to the text, what it says is, we want to practice meditation in these 4 postures: standing, sitting, lying down, and walking, and every other posture. That is actually the text that's given in the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. And in the Samaññaphala Sutta, which we just chanted, it's made very clear with a long list of occasions for practicing mindfulness for the samana, for the renunciant on the Buddhist path of awakening. The bhikkhu is to practice mindfulness when extending the arm and retracting the arm, when lying down, when standing up, those are the formal ones. When using the toilet, it's explicitly stated that this is not a practice to be strictly observed in formal situations. It's something that one develops a continuity with, that one internalizes. Just like sila, it becomes second nature. And indeed, it's synonymous with sense restraint. it's a kind of holding back an awareness of what it is that one's doing, what one's just done, what one's doing, what one's about to do. A slightly heightened awareness of what's happening, what one's doing, what one's experiencing, continuously. And like Sila, that adds a foundation for awareness to grow on the gradual path towards samadhi. Samadhi isn't something that has to be grasped for. If one develops the gradual training in this way, it develops naturally out of this cultivation of sila and of mindfulness. I'll stop there and continue with the Samaññaphala Sutta tomorrow, I think.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.